Welcome to my garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. It's now the third week in October, and here I am with my sleeves rolled up, and it's actually hot out today. However, we had a frost last week, and so my garden, I'm starting to take it down. I'm in the herb garden right now, and it was not hit badly because it's a little higher than some of the other areas of the garden. But some of the plants did get touched by the frost. I'm ready to start working on the herb garden. We can still pick a few herbs. I still have a little lemon verbena. This one will go with the next hard frost for sure. And we have thyme, and there's no more basil left. That goes right away. But I do have the thyme and some oregano that can be picked, sage, and a few chives. The chives are going fast, but we could still pick a few. I've already raked this garden once and put some compost around each of the perennial plants that are in the garden. The annual plants that I put in the spring, I will be taking out as soon as the frost takes them. I can use them until that time. Then I'll put some compost around the two roses that are in the garden, around the base, mound it up a little bit for their winter protection. I have a nice little rosemary over here, which you probably can't see, but I will probably dig that one up and attempt to save it over the winter. I do not have great luck because I don't have the place that it likes, which would be cool and humid. I have either cool or humid, but not both in the same spot. So I have a little trouble keeping it going. But I'll try this one in my front entry, and it should be fine unless it gets too cold. Rosemary will be fine outdoors until it goes below 20 degrees, so it still has maybe another month to go before we get down into that territory. Sage can be picked now. Sage dries extremely well, and it's always good to have on hand for that Thanksgiving stuffing. Also, thyme can be picked and either dried or used fresh. It'll still be good for Thanksgiving, unless we happen to get a snowstorm, which I don't think is too likely at this point, since it's probably 75 degrees today. However, we are anticipating the temperature to go down the next few days and then creep up again into the 70s again next week. So fall is kind of a up and down temperatures lately, and we enjoy these good days after the frost, and it gives us a chance to get out there and get our gardens cleaned up as much as we wish. Now let's go over to the perennial garden, and there's some things to do over there. The zinnias that I have here were hit by the frost, and strangely enough, there's a bud on this one that was not touched, but most of the plants have been, so I will probably be pulling those out for the compost. I had a potted plant out here, and it too will be composted in the pot, put into storage for the winter. I put in a few mums this year. I thought for this show that I would have some lovely color out here. However, the rabbits had other ideas, and I had forgotten to put any blood meal around them, and the blood meal does help with it. I have one remaining chrysanthemum out here that I did put some blood meal around, was able to save a little bit, but for the most part, this one had lovely pink blooms, and it got completely eaten off. For winter, I will fill this basket with the oak leaves and put it over this mum and hope that possibly it has had enough time to form some roots and come back next year. And next year, maybe I will be a little more timely with the preventive, and we'll get some blooms. It's time to plant some tulips, and every year I plant them. They don't come back every year. I sometimes get a couple years out of them. but I do enjoy them, and they're such a bright spot in the summer. This time I'm putting in one that's called Flaming Perissima, and I've already dug the hole and gotten the rocks out of the way. And I'm going to put 5 in this hole, and I'm planting them as about 8 inches deep, which is what's recommended. And I like to plant them close so I have a nice bunch. I'm going to put 5 of them right here, and then I'll put some more in another spot later on. Daffodils, hyacinths are a little less likely to get eaten by deer and other creatures, rabbits namely, but I do like the tulips, and so I always plant a few of those. I have lots of daffodils and lots of hyacinths, and I don't add anything when I plant the tulips. If I put anything on, it will be some bulb fertilizer in the spring. I don't really want to call attention to this for squirrels to dig them up. So I'm going to stomp them down pretty good, and we'll put some leaves over them for the winter, and hopefully we'll see some bright blooms come spring. Again, I put baskets over chrysanthemums. I'll fill it with oak leaves first and then put a rock on top. And I also do this with lavenders. It gives them a little extra winter protection. These are asters, which have not even bloomed yet. They probably will bloom in another week. They're blue. This is a Eupatorium chocolate. And you wouldn't know it was chocolate, but it did have chocolate-colored leaves up until they turned to this brilliant gold. And it has the white blooms on it. It adds some color to the garden in the fall. Again, I've started cleaning up. I've cut back a large Siberian iris here. I try to cut back the iris. I leave a lot of the plants, particularly the native ones, because they are home to some of the native insects that pollinate the plants in the summer. But I will cut off some of the others that are non-native and keep them. I'm picking up these plant supports that I've had around the plants. As I cut them down, I'll pick these up and put them away. It makes it a lot easier to rake in the spring if you don't have a lot of wires in the garden. This is a poppy, and it was dormant for the latter part of the summer, and now it's starting to put on leaves. This is totally normal for a poppy. As I've done the iris, I've picked some of the seed pods, and these can be used in fall decorations. And there are other things throughout the garden that I will pick to use dried in fall and winter decorations. So I'm going to put them down here. We have some things coming up that may come next year. These are foxgloves, and they're probably on their 2nd year, so they should bloom next year. And I have a number of those throughout the garden. Once we have a leaf cover on the garden, it will protect those over the winter. Moving down this way, I have a blue aster. This is the aster that in July I cut down by half. Last year it took up the whole area. It was way too big. So I did what they call a Chelsea chop, which is after the Chelsea flower show in England. People trim down some of the perennials so that they will bloom a little later. And this is probably blooming a little later than it would had I left it, but it is much more manageable, and you can see the lovely Sedum Autumn Joy in back and the plumes of the other flowers behind it as they go to seed. Again, more zinnias that were clipped by the frost, and they'll just be pulled out and composted along the way. One of the things that I do cut back would be the peonies. peony's foliage tends to carry some disease, so this will not go in the compost. It will go in the trash or in another area of the yard that is just used for long-term compost, as it were, and never used as compost on other plants. Coming down here, I do have a white chrysanthemum here, and I did put the blood meal on it to help it stay white. And I have another one. At this point, this has been half eaten by, I think, rabbits. And I didn't know they liked chrysanthemums, but I guess I found out that they do. Rabbits seem to change their taste every year. Some years they eat my asters to the ground, and this year they decided they liked chrysanthemums. So I'm not sure. They have a very nice selection of things that they like. Coming up this way, I still have a couple of dahlias that I planted in here, and I've dug some of my dahlias, but I'm going to dig these two now and take out the support structure and then find where the root is, and we'll dig it up. And this is the corm of the dahlia, and I'm going to, this will be saved, brought inside, put in a cool room. The top will be composted or discarded, and the dahlia corms, they can even be, this can even be separated. There are several eyes here, so we could get several plants out of this dahlia. This was a pink one. The one behind it was an orange one. And that actually originates over here. And you want to be careful not to cut into that bulb. And this one has a nice bulb structure too. Again, this can be saved and replanted next year. I'll cut off the top. And right here's one of the peonies. Actually, here's another piece of dahlia. This one is not so good, so I may not save that one. I have quite a few already. I did cut back the Shasta daisy that was here so that you could see what I was doing with the dahlias, and also to remind me to take out some of the Shasta daisy, because I have some ironweed here that was getting smothered by the Shasta daisies. So they will need to be divided probably in the spring so that the ironweed can reach its full potential. Set this up. Coming around here, we have another aster ready to bloom. This one's blue. Got one bloom out, but the rest will come out, especially with these sunny days. We could use a little rain. It's been pretty dry. Anything that you planted this year or a new plant that you put in the fall definitely needs to get some water as we go into winter. Things need to be well hydrated. Hopefully we will be getting some fall rains coming up, and then that will provide the water that they need to go into the winter. Otherwise, anything new, be sure to put a bucket of water on it about once a week. Now let's head over to the vegetable garden. I've done a lot of work since the frost last week in cleaning up the vegetable garden. I've pulled out the tomatoes and the peppers. They were finished and gone. I had a few tomatoes that came in the house that weren't quite ripe. Earlier I picked some of the green tomatoes and made some green tomato mincemeat, which I'll use in the fall to make some mincemeat cookies or possibly some tarts. And we still have a few things left that are pretty frost tolerant. I have arugula and kale and perpetual spinach, a little celery, a little lettuce, and definitely some broccoli and a few cabbages. Cabbages look kind of rough, but by the time you peel them down, they're just fine. The broccoli is my favorite time of year. We're getting little side shoots of broccoli, and it's just 1-bite pieces, but with this much broccoli, I get enough for a meal about once a week. The nice part is we don't have it to worry about spraying it because the cabbage moths have gone. So there are no cabbage moths out here, and that is a relief. I have a little Chinese broccoli and of course parsley. The parsley I will leave for the winter. The rest of this stuff will come out eventually, but the parsley will stay all winter and be covered with some straw, and it'll be back in the spring, so I'll have a spring crop of parsley to use early before what I seed comes up. One thing that I'll do, we're going to do some rototilling of this area, which is pretty weedy. This is where the squash was. And you can see I had a great crop of butternut squash this year. And these will go into my garage and be near the back door so that I can use it this winter. I still have a couple that need to cure a little bit. They aren't quite as ripe as they should be. But most of this is ripe and we've started using it in the kitchen. Have eaten several. I have a few flowers left, a few marigolds, and some of the Queen Anne's lace type. This is Dara. It's a Queen Anne's lace type flower, but it comes in different colors. I have predominantly white right now, but this one's a purple one, which is pretty nice. And these can be brought in and put in a vase. And I will leave those as long as they haven't been touched by frost. Again, we will plow up and I'll be planting garlic. I have some of the garlic that I harvested this year, and I also bought a couple new different kinds to try. And I'll be putting that in as soon as we get this tilled up. I've marked off my strawberry patch so that we'll till around it and leave a 4-foot swath of strawberries. And 4 feet is about how much I can lean in to pick from each side. I can lean in 2 feet this way and 2 feet the other way. So that's why I choose 4 feet for the width of my patch. And it's worked out pretty well. These strawberries are getting a little old, and I may decide to plant a new crop of strawberries next year. However, the first year when you plant strawberries, you need to remove the blossoms to get good plants that will last for 4 or 5 years. So I will keep the old ones to get at least a small harvest before the new ones are ready. Now I think we can head out and go back to the shade garden, which is quite refreshing on a day like today. Oh, I've got a few Brussels sprouts here too as we go. And those, again, I will leave as long as possible. And they can take quite a lot of frost. But I have some small sprouts. They are not, I've had better ones, but these will at least be available for several meals. And also some parsnips, which become sweeter as the weather gets cooler, and I'll dig those probably about Thanksgiving. Let's head back to the shade garden. It's time to bring in all of my little garden decorations that I have throughout the garden. In the summer, they go into storage in my shed in the winter, and also any clay pots. I emptied this one, and I will be emptying others. I'll wash them and store them again in the shed. Any plastic pots can be left out. They will be okay in a sheltered spot, just turned upside down. But the clay pots, if they fill with water and freeze, will crack. So you do want to get any clay pots that you have, especially if they're kind of artisan pots, in from the cold before it freezes. Leaves. We have tons of leaves, and many of them I will leave on the plants. Others I will blow off or take off. one of the things that I do cut would be hosta. And the hosta are starting to yellow, and I will cut those. And the reason I cut them back, they will just die back, and any of the ferns that are out here just kind of melt away, and I leave them. But the hosta tend to make a little bit of a mess in that they stay around the base of the plant, and they provide a nice home for some of the insects that like slugs, that like hosta, like slugs. And so I will remove the hosta leaves and make sure I get them out of the garden. The hellebores are evergreen, and they stay evergreen all winter. Their leaves can be cut in the spring, about just before they bloom. They bloom in March. So we look forward to some color in here in March. And this particular fern is a Christmas fern, and it too stays green all winter. So we do keep a little green around here throughout the winter months. The Lakothway also stays green. I like to see some green. It looks nice when it has a little frosting of snow on it, or just instead of brown bare earth. I want to plant some bulbs back here. Now, most of the time you don't plant bulbs in the shade. I do have some crocuses, early crocuses here, because it does get sun back here before the leaves come on the trees in the spring. But for the most part, things like tulips and daffodils and hyacinths just aren't going to do very well in this environment. It's just too shady. They like sun. But this plant is called a dogtooth violet, and I have some that grow in other areas back here, but these are tiny little corms, and we'll plant them root side down, and I think there are 6 in here, 5 or 6, and I've already dug the holes, and I'm just going to put them down not too deep. We'll put 3 in that hole and some of the sawdust too that's around them, and then cover them up. If we don't get rain, I will water these bulbs that we've planted so that they can start making some good roots to come up next spring. And I've got another spot here where I'll put some more, and we'll see if we can get them to grow. These are a white dogtooth violet. I have yellow ones in another area. And put a couple in here. And cover them up. And hope to see them in this area in the spring. And again, fasten them down. And now let's go back to the pond, which I'm getting ready for winter too. I do have a net over the pond, and it really helps to keep the leaves off. And I can blow them off the net periodically. I actually blew them off the net this morning, but you can see they're coming down at a pretty fast clip. The fish are still there, and I've left the waterfall running in the filtration system. But that will be coming out shortly. I've propped the net up on an old sprinkler support to keep it so the net doesn't fall into the pond, and so the leaves can blow off to some extent. I will be taking out the pump, the filter, and the waterfall probably about next week, before it gets too very cold. And we'll leave the net on for a little while. I hear a frog in here croaking. We have a number of frogs that can still get in. I've made sure to leave spots so the frogs can get in and out. And I have some cool weather food for the fish, which they like. I think today they could use regular summer food, but the pond probably is a little colder since the nights do get cold. The nights are going down into the 30s and 40s, so the water probably stays a little bit colder. So they appreciate the food. I have my de-icer ready to go in the pond once the leaves are all down and I take the net off. And this keeps a hole in the ice, which exhausts any gases from the pond that the fish create, and then they can stay alive. I suspect that the rocky edge leaves some edge unless we get really heavy snow. But this will keep a hole in the pond, and I have a thermostatic plug that I plug it into, which means it doesn't draw electricity unless it needs to, which saves a bit on the electric bill for a pond. There are frogs in the pond, and they will disappear into the mud or somewhere else come winter. I don't know where they go. I think probably into the mud at the bottom of the pond and stay there until spring, and then I have frogs again. The plants all came inside. Most of my plants, house plants, have come inside, those that I intended to bring in. I have begonias in this pot, and I would like to save them for another year. So what I'm going to do is just cut them off. The frost has clipped them, not completely deadened them, but clipped them enough that it's time. And there are two, a white one and a pink one. And I'll bring this pot in and put it in a cool bedroom that we don't heat. If I had a cellar that was cool, I would use that, but I don't. So a cool cellar or a room that's cool. So far, so good. We have a bedroom that does not get much heat, doesn't get used anymore, and my plants have done well in that and come back in the spring. I'll pull it out in about April, give it some water. I'll leave it very dry all winter, and hopefully we'll see sprouts grow and I can put it back out next summer. In my shed, this is another begonia. I'll do the same thing with that one. This is about its 5th year, and again I will take the leaves out, cut it off, and move it into the house and keep it in a dry, cool condition all winter, and pull it out in the spring, water it, and hopefully it will continue to come up and bloom each year. Some years last year I repotted it. About every 3rd year I put it in new soil and a new pot. In my shed, which you can't see, I have all the dahlias and cannas that I have dug. And you saw me dig 2 of them, but I have numerous ones that were on the other end of the garden. They multiply like crazy, so I have those, and then I have the canna lilies, which are the tall red lilies. And what I do for the winter is store them in paper bags with pine needles. You can use straw or peat or sawdust. I have pine needles, so that's what I use. And it's worked out fine. There's no sense to go and buy peat to store bulbs if you have something like sawdust or pine needles available. I'm not sure leaves would work. They might be a little too wet, but the pine needles are quite dry, and they have worked very well so far in keeping these going for the winter. So most of these items will be coming in the next couple weeks. I will leave the heron out for a while to kind of protect my fish once we take the net off. But most other decorative items will be stored away in the shed. It gets a little crowded in there in the winter, but we do okay with it. And then can get everything out. Some of the patio furniture also gets stored in there. So now let's go up to the patio and then inside and see what we can cook up for a fall meal. I grow my hot peppers back here by the patio. It's very warm back here. The brick pavement picks up a lot of sun and heat, and they seem to do really well. I've already picked all my jalapenos. I got about 30 jalapenos off of this one plant, and I just need a few. I will freeze them. I cut them, seed them, and then freeze them in bags. You don't need to process them in any way. You can just go ahead and freeze them. This one is called a matchbox pepper, and it's a hot pepper, and it's kind of decorative, but also it's a tasty pepper. So I will also freeze some of those. The red ones are not quite as hot. The green or yellow ones are a little bit hotter. And I will pick a number of those, and they're good in the winter when you need just a little hot pepper in something. And again, they freeze extremely well. But I enjoy just seeing them out here too. This is another piece of the same pepper. It's a huge bush. All these plants will be removed once it gets a little bit colder. And then I'll plant some more small, short tulips in this area to bloom for next spring before I once again put my peppers out here. I have my bird feeders ready. I've already started feeding the birds in one bird feeder, this one, and they have found it already. I haven't put any suet in yet. I'll wait until it's colder for that. And this is the end of my hanging plant. And what I've done is I decorated it for Halloween. I thought it looked a little spooky. It's got the purple plectranthus, which was growing in the pot. There is one bud on a red geranium, and we have several other plants that have expired, which again look a little spooky to have some dead plants in there too. So I just put my big spider on it, and we'll call it a Halloween arrangement until after Halloween. And then it too can go in the compost, and the bird feeder can replace it for the winter. Again, furniture will be put away, and the grill will stay covered out here. We'll use the grill. We do use the grill all winter, weather permitting, so it stays out. And other things will be raked, and the leaves on the lawn we usually just mow over and mulch into the lawn, and they provide some nutrients for the lawns where there are leaves. Where there are pine needles, we rake them up and put them on paths throughout the yard. I have a path back to my brook and the paths around the garden, the area border around the garden. And they work very well to keep the weeds down and make a good path. And there's nothing like using what you have instead of hauling it off to the landfill. Now let's go inside. These are the cuttings that I took in August, September time frame. There's about 3 to a pot, and they have all rooted nicely. And once I'm inside, I will divide them up and put each one in their own pot. I don't feel too bad about my containers going with the frost because I know that I'll have enough plants for next year because of the cuttings that I took this year. Each year I take cuttings and bring them in. I have some scented geraniums, and mostly these are coleus, which are very sensitive to the frost, but they do grow and root extremely well. One of the things I'll be doing this winter is when I see 2 tiny little leaves in the middle of each plant, I will pick it out, and this continues throughout the summer. These will get 3 feet tall in each plant next summer, but I want them to be bushy instead of just one long tall stalk. So by pinching out these little tiny leaves in the middle, the plant will branch. I think I have some here. Here's one that's already branching. And you can see where I had 1 leaf, now I have 2, and then I'll have 4, and so on, if I am diligent and keep up with my pinching. There's another one that's starting to bush out. So these stay under lights all winter. I give them about 12 to 15 hours worth of artificial light, fluorescent light. I don't have any fancy lights. They're just regular fluorescent lights. I think I have several different shades, colors, but they're just plain lights. The other thing that I'll be doing inside in the near future is separating seeds. And these are milkweed seeds. And they have a lot of fluff on them, and I want to get the fluff off. Usually if you shake them, you get quite a bit off, and then you have to do some picking and separate the seeds from the carrier that carries it around to new locations. And then I have little bags. These are coin bags. And the coin bags then are used once I get the seeds separated. And a plate or something helps so you can see them. I wouldn't want to separate them on this dark table. And once I have a number of seeds, I'll put some in each bag and then label it with my pen. We'll label it as common milkweed. And then I can share it with others, friends and others. And they can plant them either now or a little later early in the spring, January or February. They're very good for the winter seeding in a milk jug. And they should come up next spring and grow. And I have others here that will be planted just next spring, not necessarily in the winter. So that's what I do with the seeds, and throw away the chaff or save it in a plastic bag and put it out for the birds in the spring. It doesn't take up much space in a little plastic bag, just to keep it around and provide some nesting material for the birds. All of my bird houses have been brought in or at least cleaned out if I can't bring them in. Some of them are installed permanently. So I've brought the bird houses in. The hummingbird feeder came in September. The hummingbirds leave early to mid-September and you don't see them again. So that's time to bring the hummingbird feeder in, clean it up well, and store it away until next May for the hummingbirds. Now let's go in the kitchen and see what we can cook up for Halloween. Halloween is coming, but also fall and busy times outside cleaning up. And this is something that should be a rather easy meal to make, and I'm going to make it a little more like Halloween. I have never used a prepared pizza crust, but I'm doing it now, and we'll see how this turns out. As I said, I have never done it, but this is a refrigerated pizza crust, and I'm going to attempt to put it on this sheet. Not sure exactly how they unroll. This seems to be working. And not sticking to itself too badly. And I need to pull it around this way a little bit. So it stays on the sheet. There we are. That should do it. What we're going to make is a sausage calzone. And get rid of the papers. We don't need those. And I'm going to start out by putting some margarita pizza sauce down the middle of this as the base. Again, I'm using prepared items for the most part, so it's a little quicker. Put a good amount in. And on top of that, I'm going to put some sausage that I already browned up earlier. This is just Italian sausage. Sweet or hot, your choice. Be also a nice thing for a football tailgate. Calzone. And then we have some mozzarella cheese. And I'll put that on top. You could use salami or other Italian cold cuts along with the sauce and the cheese instead of the sausage, if you wished, or vegetables if you wanted to make a vegetarian version. Sauteed vegetables. And then I'm going to cut slits in this because we're making it a little Halloween. So we're turning it into a mummy. And I have to cut slits along both sides. And a pair of clean kitchen scissors work wonderfully for this, as they do for many kitchen tasks. I have several pair of these scissors, and I use some in the garden exclusively, and a pair in the kitchen. And I think I'm going to fold up some of it, and then start crossing it over like a mummy, wrapping it. Just crisscrossing it over. There, that looks, I guess, like a mummy wrap. And then it's going to go into a 350 oven for about half an hour. And that's all set. Oh, forgot to, I need to brush it with some egg. This is just an egg wash. Beaten egg with about a teaspoon of water. This will give it a nice aged finish. Brown it up a little bit as it cooks. There we are. Now it can go in the oven. And I'll set the timer for 30 minutes. The next thing I want to make is a little appetizer, and I'm going to make a cheesy appetizer with a block of cream cheese. And actually you can double this if you want to make a larger pumpkin, but I'm making a smaller one. So 1.5 tablespoons of chopped onion with the 8-ounce block of cream cheese. And 3/4 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. And I will need this later. But I'm going to use my mixer and mix this together well. Starting out slower and at this point I'm going to add a tablespoon of salsa to it. Give it a little color. And continue mixing. So we have kind of an orange color. Get it off the beavers and remove them. At this point, I'm going to put out a piece of plastic wrap and put the mixture right into the middle. Then I'll pull up the corners, and this will make our round pumpkin shape. At this point, I'll put it in the refrigerator and we'll chill it for overnight or several hours. Can be made in advance. Then when it's time to serve it, I'm going to complete the pumpkin look. And here's one that's been in the refrigerator. And what I'm going to do is roll it around in some, using a lot of plastic wrap here, roll it around in some Doritos that have been crushed. These are crushed Doritos, they're orange. And we want to get it nicely coated with that. And if you need to shape it a little more into a pumpkin shape, you can do that too. I'm going to put them in the middle of my tray. And then to make it look more like a pumpkin, I'll get my piece of string and we will press it into the pumpkin to make kind of little indentations that look more like a pumpkin, segments, as it were. And then to make it really look like a pumpkin, I'm going to put a pepper stem in it. This is a stem off of a yellow pepper. And then, since it is Halloween, if it weren't Halloween, I probably wouldn't put these on. But these are, I found these at the store and I thought they were rather clever. They are ghost and bats, ghosts and bats. And they're chips, little ghost and bat chips. So I thought they were a nice touch for Halloween. Then we need dessert. So we'll make some dessert. And I have peanut butter cookies, and I made the peanut butter cookies. You can also buy peanut butter cookies. Instead of using a fork to mash these down, as usual, I just cooked them, and they came out this way. And then I'm going to use a miniature peanut butter cup, and I'm going to put eyes in it. These are the little eyes you can get at the grocery store or craft store, and then set the peanut butter cup on top of the cookie. And the eyes actually press in quite well. You don't have to use anything to stick them. They stick. And actually, I was amazed at how many expressions you can get just with eyes. Putting them on, having them in different locations. Then I've got chocolate frosting in my decorator. And again, it could be homemade or purchased. And it's probably again. I will start that one over. It dried in the end of the tube. Okay, I pick it up again. I have prepared the frosting in advance and it did dry at the end of the tube. So I'm using a toothpick in order to clear it. And then I'm going to make my spider legs. And spiders do not have 6 legs, they have 8. So we got to put 8 legs on the spider because there's some young person who knows that. And if he comes to your Halloween party, he will tell you if you put 6 legs on. Or she. But this keeps going with the peanut butter theme. And I will have these 3 join the others on my plate. And that's going to be our dessert. Now with the calzone, I'm checking my time over there. It's still good. We're going to serve some salads. And as I said, we have arugula from the garden. I'm going to make plated salads today with some of the arugula leaves. I tried to use some of the more tender ones. And I'm going to add beets. And these are the beets that I picked from the garden, the last of the beets. And I'll put a few of those on each salad. These have been roasted in the oven. And what I do is I clean them well and leave them unpeeled and then roast them in the oven for about an hour at 350 and then peel them. It works much better than trying to peel them before you roast them. And then we'll add some other things to these salads. Some blue cheese. And some toasted walnuts. I like to toast the walnuts in a 350 oven for about 5 minutes. It really makes a big difference in how they taste. And we'll serve this with a balsamic vinaigrette, just drizzled on. Which is olive oil, balsamic vinegar, a touch of honey, and a pinch of Italian seasoning. Have a few salads here. Okay, the calzone is ready to add to our rest of our meal, and I'm going to dress it up a little bit as a mummy, and I'm going to put some eyes on it. These are I think I'm needing a knife here to make a little slit to put an olive for eyes in. There, that's better. You could use green olives or black olives. And then I have a piece of roasted red pepper. I thought he needed a tongue too, so we've got a tongue on our mummy. So there we have our Halloween mummy and our ghost and bat chips with a pumpkin cheese dip, the arugula and beet salads, and some peanut butter cookies for dessert, peanut butter spider cookies. I wanted to point out the centerpiece. Normally at this season, or maybe a little earlier, I would have had some flowers from the garden. But since we've had a frost and my zinnias and dahlias are all brown by now, I went out and I picked a few dried things from the yard and around the yard and put them in with a few pumpkins. And this will be a long-lasting fall decoration that will last through Thanksgiving as a centerpiece or a side piece. Thank you for joining me today. You've been watching A Walk in the Garden with Liz Davey, and this is the Fall 2024 show on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television.